Hello and welcome to another Who's He video podcast with me, Phil. A few months ago we released a special video podcast dedicated to the enfant terrible and master of monster acting, Hamilton Prickwillow, who recounted some of his experiences of working on Doctor Who. We approached Hamilton again for a further interview, to which he readily agreed, as according to him, he still had plenty of scores to settle. Unfortunately, shortly after this interview was recorded, Hamilton Prickwillow sadly died. His family said his condition was favourable. We at the Who's He podcast are deeply saddened at his sudden passing, and we are proud to have known him, however briefly that was. Earlier today, his son Dingleberry Prickwillow released this statement to the press in honour of his father.
I would like to thank the members of the press for coming today. I have prepared a short statement that I'd like to read. My father, while always errant from our lives, working across the country, still managed to be a fantastic shit to us all. Selfish, vain, and incredibly bitter. He was always jealous of others' success, particularly of Warrington Flange, who was a superior actor and whose death my father took great comfort from. It was this jealousy that led to my father's sudden death, dying from envelope glue poisoning, as he was writing 50 poison pen letters a day to the actress Glenda Jackson. This is despite her giving up acting in 1992. So I can only say this. Good riddance to the old bastard. You are to acting like hemorrhoids are to horse riding. Thank you. Thank you.
So, not a happy childhood then. Despite this, his family and estate have given us permission to show you this, Hamilton Prickwillow's final interview. Despite the ravages of envelope glue, this interview, recorded once again in his gentleman's club, finds Hamilton in good form and full of stories from his days of working on Doctor Who. So without further ado, the Who's He podcast are proud to bring you the final interview with Hamilton Prickwillow.
When I was cast as the third Monoptera, a little bit to the right in the Web Planet, I've been recommended by William Hartnell himself. I'd gained his respect when I say the production of The Keys of Marinus and Dear Bill would always work with people that he really trusted. So now that I was part of his inner circle, as it were, Bill told the director, Richard Martin, that I was to be cast. And that was that, as everyone was absolutely terrified of Bill. He reduced Richard Martin to tears once, you know. Bill wasn't happy with the bandage on his head and net of destruction, so he kept flicking the end of Martin's nose, going, until Martin started sobbing. Bill was a terror, but it was always with good reason, you know. It was always for the good of the show. Anyway, when I went for my old costume fitting along with my fellow actors, Montague Bushygap, Ashcroft Scrimton Plimpton, and Bancroft Fingerfudge, seeing the butterfly come bumblebee costume for the first time was quite a shocking too. We all felt bloody ridiculous, to be honest, as I thought I looked like a giant humbug with wings. But this was nothing compared to the Zarvi costume. The actors inside them couldn't see or hear a bloody thing. So I did have a degree of sympathy for them. Well, all of them except one, of course, John Scott Martin. John Scott Martin was a terrible practical joker. There's a little in fact, you know. But I have little tolerance for practical jokers. They're a bloody nuisance. And when you have a job to do, you don't want them pissing about. Acting is a serious business. What happened to me has been kept secret for years, but as you know, the Monoptera flew. And this was my chance to do my own stunts. I'd always wanted to do more stunts, and as I didn't want to be represented on screen by someone in an ill-fitting wig, and this was my big chance, a dream come true, if you will. So when they came to film the flying scenes, I'm strapped into this bloody harness and hiked up into the rafters on piano wire. I started looking around at the others there, and they all seemed very calm and serene. But what was I doing? Clutching my balls, that's what. My harness was done up so tight it pushed my swanicles so far up you could have confused them with my tonsils. I looked down at the studio floor, with tears streaming down my face, and all I could see was John Scott Martin, chuckling to himself. Turns out he thought he'd made a fantastic wheeze to have my harness over-tightened, and it would be a great way for me to bond with the crew. Well, bollocks to that. I'd already established myself as a serious actor, and I was not about to have my career derailed by a man dressed as an ant. So I just carried on as if nothing had happened. I'm a professional, and nothing gets in the way of my performance, not even swollen knackers. After they'd finished filming the flying scenes, I immediately marched over to Dickie Martin, still clutching my red-hot gonads, and demanded that John Scott Martin be sacked immediately. And my dear, dear friend Bill Hartnell was right behind me, I might add, gesticulating like this, and pointing at Dickie's nose. Well, they didn't sack him. They asked John Scott Martin to apologise to me and let that be an end to it. He proffered the hand of friendship, and I just walked away. I just refused to accept his apology. I call it stubbornness, if you will, but I have my pride, and I have my dignity as an actor. Those things are important, especially if you're playing a man-sized moth. And every production I appeared on after that dreadful, dreadful day, I avoided John Scott Martin if he was cast as well. Especially when he played a Dalek, as that was the only time he didn't muck about. That is straight little pecking order when it came to Daleks entering the room. And John Scott Martin always had to be first through the door. Actually, it was him that made sure they never got inside a Dalek. Did you know that? You know that? Yeah, they would have been me first through the bloody door, then I can tell you. I did have the last laugh, though. He desperately wanted to be a Dalek again when Doctor Who was resurrected. And Russell T Davies didn't even return his calls. Ha! Another production where I nearly bloody well got killed was The Invasion of Time. Now, once again I was called upon by Graham Williams, who was in a dreadful flap with this story, as they were one Sontaran short. Actually, the only occasions I ever spoke to Graham is when he was in a flap and needed my help. So anyway, I was the go-to actor for Doctor Who Monsters, though. And my reputation as a no-nonsense professional was as far-reaching as Bill Cotton Jr. In fact, dear Bill asked me to be the godfather to his granddaughter, Fern Cotton. But I refused, as she was, well, quite frankly, bloody annoying even then. So anyway, the Sontarans were added to the story very late in the day, so dear Graham was scrabbling all over the place, trying to find actors to fill the costumes. Now, as we all know, they cast Derek Deadman and Stuart Fell, as they were of short stature, whereas I'm 6'2". But Graham knew what he was doing, as one of my acting techniques is to condense. You see, once I put on a costume, I inhabit the character. So such is my skill, I am able to actually shrink. Yeah, so in fact, you know, all the times the Master shrunk people with that dildo gun of his, well, they were all me. So, as we were assembled for our costume fittings, I performed my condensing trick, but to my left, one of the other actors was eyeing me with envy. Do you know who that was? You know who that was? Warrington Bloody Flange, that's who. Oh, God, this was the first time we had actually crossed paths. And his envy of my acting skills was, well, quite frankly, already evident. But I had no idea, absolutely no idea, to what lengths he would go to ruin one of my performances. I really had, absolutely clueless. While everyone else was marvelling at my condensing, I let slip that it actually increases my body mass, and therefore makes me a little bit heavier than usual. So running and jumping could be a bit awkward, especially in the Sontaran costume, which was, well, quite as bulky and heavy as it was, really. But everything went fine, recording in the studio. There were no dramas until we went to film the TARDIS chase scene at the swimming pool. Oh dear, yes. In fact, the whole filming sequence became extremely debauched, as the crew decided to have a pool party in between filming. I can't really go into too much detail, unfortunately, as most of the people concerned are still alive. But I will say this, the police were involved. And a big bag of crabs. But getting back to the filming, when it came to the scene where Tom is chased round the swimming pool, I was chosen, naturally, to lead the charge, as it were. we had rehearsed this scene at the Acton Hilton, and Tom Baker and I shared a few lunchtime drinks, going over the scene, even going as far as to rehearse the scene in the pub, whilst actually still holding our drinks. We didn't spill a drop. That's how much we rehearsed it. Totally dedicated to it we were. You see, people always criticise Doctor Who for its cheap production values, but everyone put their hearts and souls into it, even to the point we would lose valuable drinking time to ensure we got things right. That's how professional we were. It just goes on to show, people forget this. Anyway, the day arrived when we filmed the scene of the swimming pool, and I was raring to go. Never before had I felt so confident about filming in my entire life. But then I noticed something in the corner of my eye. A sun lounger. It wasn't there before, and it certainly didn't feature in our rehearsals. I immediately remonstrated with the director, Gerald Blake, as this sun lounger could have spelled total and utter disaster for the production. A fifth series, Blake 7, was actually cancelled due to an unplanned appearance of an escritoire. So it goes to show, you cannot leave anything to chance. You just cannot. It's totally unacceptable. Anyway, whilst I was shouting at Gerald, I hadn't realised that Warrington Flange was standing behind me, with a gigantic smirk on his loathsome, fart-ridden face. Tom Baker told me this in the BBC bar later that evening over a bucket of Campari. Yes, it transpires that Flange, totally and utterly jealous of my condensing skills, placed the sun lounger in the way, knowing that my now increased mass and the bulky costume would make it extremely difficult to jump over. Well, yes, it was. However, after Gerald Blake said it was too late to move the sun lounger, as the scene shifters were on a tea break, and any attempt to move it would result in a wildcat strike. So I had no option but to make the jump. Dear. Now this was a real test of my skills as an actor, and I was determined that this would be my finest hour. So Tom set off round the swimming pool, and I gave chase, and I very nearly did it. I leapt onto the chair and tried to use it to help me to launch into the air. But unfortunately, the sun lounger, well, it just collapsed under my condensed weight, and I tripped over. And I nearly got away with it too, had it not been for Tom throwing another sun lounger at me. And that was it. I went arse over tit. Dear. I was distraught. I was absolutely distraught. Flange thought it was hilarious, and immediately went over to Gerald Blake and tried to worm his way into his good books by saying that he could do it better, like the odious little shit that he was. But fortunately for me, they didn't have time to film it again, so they had to go with what they had, which wasn't much, to be honest. But what happened next was truly remarkable. The wonderful Stuart Fell saw what was going on and took me to one side and said, "Don't worry about it, Hamilton. What Flange did was appalling. I will tell everyone it was me who fell over." Well, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What an absolute gentleman. Well, of course, I immediately accepted his generous offer, as I was an actor of some stature with a reputation to uphold. So, there you go. The secret is out. Well, that little incident set in motion the long-running hatred between Warrington Flange and myself. The little yes, the twin dilemma. Unfortunately, this was the only story I appeared in with the wonderful Colin Baker. It's such a shame we'd never worked together again, as we got on tremendously well. We really did. But even this single appearance together was pure circumstance. In fact, it was amazing it happened at all. It all goes back to 1980 and the production of Full Circle. They were casting actors to play the Marshmen, and finding work on Doctor Who at this time was particularly difficult. The producer that had just taken over on Doctor Who, John Nathan Turner, wasn't particularly fond of hiring cast and crew from series past. So a lot of us were pretty much, really, just left in the cold. It was a shock to a lot of us, as, well, really working on Doctor Who felt like being part of a family. Then all of a sudden, there's a new head of the family, and you'll find yourself, well, being asked to leave home, as it were. Yes, great shame that, really. But thanks, really, to dear old Barry Letts, who was holding Nathan Turner's hands throughout that particular series. He got me cast as the lead Marshman. Nathan Turner wasn't happy. In fact, he totally ignored me, even though I put in the performance of a lifetime, to which I got standing ovation from the cast and crew when the film got finished. Yes, wonderful days, yes. I even managed to lift Tom Baker's spirits, as he was very morose at the time. He was having... he wasn't happy at all. He was leaving the show. He wasn't happy with his costume either. It was the question marks on the shirt collar that seemed to irk him the most. Peculiar. But we had a fantastic time getting appallingly drunk most lunchtimes to lament the question mark collars mostly, and watching Tom kicking K9. Great days, yes. In fact, I was his rock during that time. I was really his Paul Burrell to his Princess Diana, except I didn't steal any of his valuables. Anyway, Nathan Turner wasn't having any of it. Out with the old and in with the new. That was his motto. Shame he didn't apply that to his bloody awful shirts. Ah, dear. Anyway, he did his utmost to keep Tom and I apart, and was quite rude to me on quite a few occasions. Once when Tom and I were sharing a cigarette between takes, Nathan Turner shouted out across the set, "Get that old bastard away from the talent." Yes, Tom and I looked at each other, wondering which of us he was actually referring to. The penny finally dropped when the director, Peter Grimwade, frog-marched me away from Tom, and I then realised that we were not going to recreate that old magic of those old days on set. Yeah, terrible shame. So imagine my surprise when Nathan Turner himself requested my services for the twin dilemma. I was having a bad patch acting-wise during this period, and if it wasn't for my reoccurring role as Terry Wogan's stick microphone on Blankety Blank, I would have been destitute. Terry always handled me with care. He was always a gentleman, but it was very demeaning to be fondled intimately by Britain's King of Light Entertainment on a weekly basis. Yes. But so getting the call from the Doctor Who production office again was a godsend. It really was. I'm not sure if Nathan Turner felt guilty after that Warriors of the Deep debacle, but being cast as the lead monster in a new Doctor's opening story was a big deal. It really was. A real honour, in fact. So when we all met for the script read-through, this was the first time I met Colin Baker, and of course the lovely Nicola Bryant. Colin and I immediately found ourselves to be kindred spirits, as we both share a keen interest in tea bag collecting, a passion we both share and converse in to this very day. So every chance we got during the shoot, we would talk about our travels across the world to find the most exotic tea bags. So, once again, Nathan Turner couldn't hide his dark side, and tried to keep Colin and I apart. Any time we would start a conversation, Nathan Turner would call out, Colin, come over here now." And Colin, being the new boy, didn't want to rock the boat, and so did as he was told. This went on for practically, the whole shoot. But when I was put in the costume of Mestor, with Edwin Richfield, dear Edwin Richfield, providing the voice, of course, Colin and I didn't get much chance to talk anyway. The Mestor costume was practically immobile, and I just had to sit there in between takes trying to see out of the damn thing. Always a common problem, that, trying to see out your costume. But this one was particularly bad, as it was cross-eyed. Ridiculous bloody looking thing. But it was a strange production, that one. Very strange indeed. I remember when Colin strode out in his new costume, the whole crew just stood there, open-mouthed. What a monstrosity. Yeah, Colin was clearly upset, as I saw his bottom lip trembling. I also can remember Nathan Turner standing there with an evil grin on his face, as if this was the reaction he wanted. But then I realised he wasn't actually looking at any of us. I followed his gaze behind Colin, and standing in the doorway was Michael Grade, who just did this. Unbelievable. And then the twins were introduced to us. Nice enough fellows, but good God, they couldn't act. They could not act. I remember dear Maurice Denham saying to me later, I might as well be acting opposite two sodding sacks of potatoes. Anyway, I saw Grade again making gestures to Nathan Turner to the effect that he was finished. The strange thing was, Michael Grade hadn't actually started working at the BBC at that time. He just prowled around the BBC television centre, making everyone's lives a bloody misery, and making rude or violent gestures to people he didn't like. Very peculiar. I wished I thought of that, actually. I really do wish I had. Yes. I was obviously thrilled when Doctor Who came back to our screens, but I realised that my time was up when it came to playing the monster. I'm just too long in the tooth, and there comes a time we just have to say enough is enough, really. My agent, Rodney Thruxton Circuit, was contacted by the Doctor Who production office, and they offered me an audition for the role of the Slovene. I was a little annoyed, to be honest, that they asked me to audition, as what I'd filmed over the years was one big audition. But I went along to Cardiff regardless. I'm an actor, and I have to work. So when I arrived there, I was initially very pleased with how they treated me. It was very much apparent that they were in awe of me, and I was, in fact, the only person from the original series they had asked to take part. At that point, anyway, yes. I was led to a room to meet Julie Gardner, Phil Collinson, and of course, Russell T. Davies. But when I walked in, the mood changed, just like that. It was the most intimidating atmosphere I've ever encountered. I really was. I remember the room being almost completely dark and devoid of furniture. There was a single chair in the middle of the room, which was under a bright white light. And at the opposite end of the room was a table where the three of them sat. It's very intimidating. I could make out Julie Gardner and Phil Collinson, but I never ever saw Russell T. Davies. He just sat in the middle of them, in the shadows. All I saw was his silhouette and great puffs of smoke coming from the enormous cigar that he was smoking. Sinister, very sinister. I did attempt to break the ice by telling off Davies for smoking, but all he said was, "Sit the f*** down." I do apologise for the language, but this is absolutely true. This really happened. Anyway, Gardner and Collinson just stared at me. Neither of them said a bloody word. Davies then said, "Can you act?" I was just about to answer when he banged his fist down the table and shouted, "Too late!" Gardner and Collinson just started a slow hand clap. I had absolutely no idea what to do. I just stood up, I did up my jacket, and said, Hinchcliffe would have had all three of you, and left the room. I later told this story to Chris Eccleston at that bloody awful Doctor Who 50th anniversary show on BBC Three. You never saw either of us on camera, though. We just hid at the back out of sheer embarrassment. The presenter kept referring to everyone by their characters' names, for Christ's sake. Idiot. And I expected more from Zoe Ball. Her father was furious. Anyway, Eccleston told me that at his audition for the role of the Doctor, he had to dance in tiny blue pants for a staggering 15 minutes. 15 minutes! In blue pants! Small ones! Well, if that's how the BBC treats its talent, I'm glad I'm out of it. But I am pleased that the Doctor Who has been a success since he came back. I wish it will. I really do. Though I have heard the Stephen Moffat's audition process is weirder than Russell's. Something to do with the mock hanging or something. I don't know. But anyway, I'm very proud. No. Extremely proud to have been part of television history. So, well, here's to Doctor Who. Cheers. Cheers.